Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Cinema Savvy. How are we all doing? We're back for another Doctor Who discussion because Doctor Who's back. First time since, I guess, Christmas. Was it Christmas Day? It would have been Christmas Day, right? When Church on Ruby Road, or whatever it was called, came out. But I'm so glad to actually be talking about Doctor Who as a series because we've gone through and we did kind of the legacy talk about all of the past series since the revival on the channel previously. We talked a little bit through the specials as well. But finally, we're actually talking about a Doctor Who series, which is absolutely fascinating. I'm Tate. For those who don't know me, I'm joined today by Sam. Say hi, Sam.
Hi, Sam. Hello. Hi, Tate. Hi, everyone.
How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, very good. I'm just coming out of being ill, so
Yes.
luckily this is like a good time where I'm about 90% of the way there. So yeah, and luckily I had 2 episodes of Doctor Who to watch. So yeah, feeling very good.
Excellent. So we want to hear from you at home. These are going to be discussions on the first 2 episodes. They're going to be spoiler filled. So please comment down below your thoughts on these first 2 episodes. We're going to go through them in chronological order. So we're going to go with Space Babies first, and then we'll talk a bit about the Devil's Court as well. But we want to know what your thoughts are so far on the series, what you're expecting from the series. We want to hear about kind of everything that you want to talk about Doctor Who, about Ncuti, about everything about the show. Just go and chat about it. Put it in the comments, and we'll create a discussion. And of course, follow us on our social media links down below as well. I'll go into that a bit later. So let's go straight into kind of where we left off with Doctor Who before these 2 episodes. So we had the Church on Ruby Road, the Christmas special, which I quite enjoyed. I know it split a lot of fans. Some people trying to get back into it, knowing that Rusty Davies is back on board. Some people, longtime fans of the show. I really enjoyed it personally. I thought it was a really fun fantasy adventure, which is not often seen in Who. We delve more into the sci-fi elements, but I do like it when Who mixes it up a little bit and goes into those fantasy elements. But what was your thoughts on the Christmas special?
It's funny because I watched it on Christmas Day, and then for whatever reason I didn't finish it. So
Really?
and I realized a few days ago, in my head I was like, oh, funny, yeah, I watched that, and then I realized that I hadn't. So a few days ago, before the 2 episodes came out, I was like, I really need to watch the last 20 minutes. And the thing is, from what I remember, the first half I was like, okay, this is good, but I wasn't like blown away or anything. And I think watching those last 20 minutes, I was like, okay, I really, really enjoy this. And as a package, I like it. Now, having finished it also, I think a really solid story. And I think following on from the specials, I think none of them were bad. I know we spoke about some of them on the channel, and I think there was no clunkers. At the same time, I don't think there was anything that was kind of like, this is on the same level as, for example, for me, like The Stolen Earth or Journey's End, or Heaven Sent and Hell Bent. There's nothing kind of on that level, but it's all consistently good, which you would expect from Russell T Davies anyway. So I think, a good, nice Christmas special to introduce Ruby Sunday, and I think a great way to kind of get new viewers on board.
Absolutely. And I guess that's kind of a really good jump point to just go straight in and talking about this first episode of the series, because what I've heard other people describing Space Babies as an episode as is a jump off point, or kind of a jump in point for people coming into the series. If you've not seen the series before, if you didn't even catch the specials, you can watch Space Babies, not really have much context beforehand, and be completely on board with it. I'd highly recommend everyone watch the specials, including the Christmas special, and then came onto this episode. But at the same time, this is kind of a introduction into everything Who. We always get those episodes whenever the Doctor gets a new companion. He's explaining the rules of the universe, explaining the TARDIS, explaining kind of what he does, who he is, or who she is in some cases. And it's really fascinating that those episodes, they come around so often, but they're always fascinating to see someone as a companion look at this world with completely brand new open eyes. And this is our introduction. We've already met Ruby Sunday from the Christmas special, so this is more of teaching her more about the universe and teaching her more about kind of what the TARDIS does, who the Doctor really is as a person, which is a very interesting point to jump off from. So The synopsis for the episode is Ruby learns the Doctor's amazing secrets when he takes her to the far future. There, they find a baby farm run by babies, but can they be saved from the terrifying bogeyman? Which, I'll be perfectly honest, as soon as I saw that thing, I wasn't a fan of it straight away. Like, I don't want to say that, it was too childish, because Doctor Who is a kid's show. And it always has been a kids' show that's enjoyed by loads of different people. However, Babies is almost like, for me, a different tier below that. The humor is going to be dialed down a little bit. It's going to be kind of put down in that sort of way. And I'm sad to say that kind of my guesses from the episode, at least from my perspective, were right straight away. And I was not a fan of this episode at all.
I think it's definitely the weaker of the two. And I think a lot of people have kind of echoed that from what I've seen on social media anyway. I think these types of episodes anyway, this kind of like introduction to the world outside of the initial episode is always kind of a tricky one to land. And yeah, I'm thinking about, the two episodes that this kind of reminds me of the most is The End of the World, from when Rose first enters the TARDIS and
It's set in the far
beast below. Yeah, it is always that, like, let's show the time travel element, and then there's something wrong, there's something wrong happening in that far future. And I think it's an interesting thing, and the great thing about the show is that it has those points, as you said. Every time there's a new Doctor or companion, there's an initial jumping off point. And, oh, you're joining this world with them. And I think, these episodes, which feel like the second episodes of the series, can be a little bit tedious in some ways, because you've got to do that, especially if you've seen it once before. You're kind of going through the motions a little bit, like, oh yeah, I've heard this. This episode is interesting to me because it's really fast paced in the information that's being provided to Ruby. Like, she takes a lot of information on board in a very short amount of time. Whether or not I like that or not, I don't know, because I feel like there's less of kind of an emotional kind of moment or significance to certain scenes. The example that I saw, was the scene in The End of the World where the Doctor lets Rose change Rose's phone so that she can ring Jackie.
Yeah.
And it's a whole kind of like, oh my God, she's dead right now, but I'm speaking to her. And it's a real kind of, significant moment for the character to realize that this can happen. Whereas with Ruby, she quickly phones her mum, and then she jokes like, oh, what's the bill on that, or whatever it is. And whilst I appreciate that the character has kind of that kind of spark and that energy to kind of just, manage kind of the emotions of having to go through something that's, quite, well, so out of this world, it's still a bit jarring, because it's like, would the average person say that? But then is the companion just an average person? And this is when I get a bit, I'm not really sure how I'm supposed to feel as a viewer.
Yes. And it's always interesting because, and this is something that we can comment on based on Russ T. Davies's kind of run in the show previously, his companions tend to have a kind of bigger thing to play in the world of Doctor Who. And we can already see that with Ruby Sunday. I mean, she's come in, and it seems like they use the word coincidence a lot. So many coincidences that seem to happen to her and everything like that. And we get that in this episode. And I find it very interesting that there was parallels and drawbacks to Rose in the story of End of the World. I was going to talk about it, with it being set in the far future, with the phone home and everything like that. And she seems to have all these different events taking place to her. And I know from the past companions and everything like that, we had it with kind of Martha saving the entire world, and we had it with Donna all the way throughout. I mean, all the way up to the specials. Donna's kind of purpose within Who and everything like that. Do you feel like Ruby Sunday is being set up to be that kind of new companion that also may or may not be some kind of god or something like that?
Yeah, and there's something that I think maybe we'll touch on a bit later, is just kind of what this series is going to be. And I think my kind of issue with kind of modern Who, basically since 2005, has been kind of this over reliance on kind of a mystery box or an overarching thing. That takes us to the finale, and that it's always about what's going to happen in the finale, who's going to be unveiled, what's, is the companion going to die, or, all of this stuff. And it always feels like it takes me out of the actual episodes that we're watching. Like, I want to watch the Doctor and the companion or whoever is with them. I want to just see this journey, this story. I don't want to be thinking, oh, I need to keep an eye out for this, and this, and oh, this will help me, in a few episodes' time. Like, I feel like I don't get to enjoy that as much as if there was no reference to that's a coincidence, or oh, this god's here, and there was something about that, and they've said that this person's
the
coming.
snow falling or anything like that
Exactly.
in this episode. Absolutely. It's it would be interesting to see how it pans out. We'll talk about it a bit more when we talk about the Devil's Court itself, because I think that delves into it a lot more. But this episode, I want to talk about I want to talk about some negatives in the episode, which I have for it. And with all of these episodes, I'll always go and watch the Doctor Who Unleashed. I still call it confidential because it is Doctor Who Confidential, but they want to call it Doctor Who Unleashed now, so we'll call it, what it is. But the behind the scenes of the episode, just so I can see the creative vision that went into it, the production that went into it, and just kind of unraveling the story a little bit, but looking at it from behind the scenes point of view. And one of the major things that I asked in this episode was, well, obviously they've got more budget from, Disney having a hand in things now. And I want to talk about that as well in a second. But, they had the idea of having babies in space, running a baby farm and everything like that. And they wanted the babies to be part of the acting. So they decided to get the babies in. They used real babies, or they used fake babies and stuff like that. But then they used CGI over the mouth and used lip syncing to be able to kind of, put the performance on, which I'll be perfectly honest, I was looking out for, and it did look very obvious, and it didn't look very fluid. It looked very uncanny to me. And Doctor Who can get away with being uncanny sometimes, but this is something so human, because they mentioned that they are human babies in the story, that, it's almost frustrating in that sense of like, this is such a odd plot that just didn't work, and I don't think ever could have worked. I don't think you could take this script and this kind of idea and make it work into a Doctor Who episode that I would like, or would be a 10 out of 10 episode or anything like that. And I know with a lot of series of Doctor Who, we have a lot of filler episodes, or we have a lot of episodes where the story doesn't really matter. It's more about kind of the character-driven stuff. But in this episode, they rely so heavily on the babies having such an important impact on the story that it's not really an episode about the Doctor. It's not really an episode about, about Ruby. It's an episode about the babies, and it's an episode about that main kind of thing. And it's frustrating in that sense that, with a show that's been going on for so long, with a show that's brought Russell T Davies back, with a show that, has all of these ideas to throw forwards, they've only come up with 8 episodes in the series, and this is one of them. It's a bit baffling to me.
Yeah, I'm kind of in two minds, because I've not seen the Unleashed episodes, unfortunately, yet, but I have watched Space Babies twice, and I've seen most of The Devil's Court twice. I've seen it once and seen most of it again on rewatch. Space Babies, the second time, I enjoyed more than the first time.
Interesting.
I don't really mind the initial idea, I guess, and I guess with kind of the way Doctor Who has looked, I can overlook maybe some of the uncanniness, and I think in a general sense it looks quite good, and it didn't seem so like, if the entire time it looked so off, I would be like, okay, but in a way it's supposed to look wrong because babies do not do that, which feels a weird thing to say out loud. Babies don't do that.
It's just baby Eric saying "I'm so happy" and having the most miserable face on at the same time.
I think I found it funny. I did find, I've got to say, a lot of the humor in these 2 episodes I really did vibe with, and a lot of it just comes from the interactions in the script, rather than the actual story. Some of the lines are excellent, and I think especially when Jocelyn, the nanny, gets involved, and there's like the translation in there when it goes like waste products rather than the S word. Things like that got me. But I think the actual plot itself is fairly simple. The babies have been left. They've managed to kind of their brains, their intelligence is there, but they're still babies. There's this bogeyman. I guess my fear for kind of these 2 episodes and for the series itself is the inclusion of fantasy and how much of it is going to be in there, because my personal take on Doctor Who is I love the sci-fi. I love kind of when it is being a bit more, you could believe that this happens, or factually, it's the year 21. I've got it written 21,506. Who knows about technology and all this stuff in the future? Anything could happen. But at the same time, I'm still a person in 2024, and I'm like, is a space station going to create a bogeyman made out of actual bogies and snot based on a story? And that's what was my main issue with this, was that element of it. I can get past space babies and all of that stuff and being trapped and calling out kind of refugee things and governments being like more about saving money than saving people. And I totally got that, and I really liked that inclusion, and I kind of wish there was more of that rather than the bogeyman element, which kind of threw it off.
Yeah, I can kind of understand that. And I know I mentioned earlier that I quite like the fantasy elements thrown in every now and then, but that is an every now and then. That is not an every single story kind of thing. And yeah, I can absolutely kind of see the point of view there. And I just wasn't a fan of the concept. I wasn't a massive fan of the episode. However, I do like the creature creation that was the bogeyman. I'm just not a fan, like, as in the design of it and everything like that. Really enjoyed that, because it is a terrifying monster for young kids to see. The issue I have with it is, one, the fact that the monster was saved at the end, which I understand why and everything like that, but for a terrifying creature, that's kind of where the Doctor could come in with a different moral code and kind of say, look, I couldn't save him, and that's where he could have a go at the humans after the story, after the fact, a la kin to, Aliens of London, where he has a go at Harriet Jones kind of afterwards and everything that went on with that. The Christmas Invasion and kind of, her role in that. But it does bring in kind of the Doctor's kind of moral compass in that way, and I can see that kind of saving not just the humans but also the monsters where he can, and everything like that. Like I said, I just didn't think it was a strong episode. I wasn't a massive fan of it. It's an interesting jump off point for the series in a whole, and we did get some interesting things in there. We mentioned Ruby with the snow and the kind of call back to, the Church on Bree Road. And that's going to be an interesting element that's brought in. And that gets discussed a lot more in the next episode. But before we go on, kind of conclude on this first episode, I want to talk a little bit about Disney. Now, I have a bone to pick with Disney. I'm really happy that they've come on board and they're expanding the Doctor Who universe and they're making it more accessible to everyone. A lot more people can go and watch Doctor Who now. It used to be only on BBC America every now and then, but now you have that on-demand ability to go and watch the episodes worldwide with Disney Plus, which is great because it means there's going to be a lot more fans coming onto the show. It means that it's going to be, it's going to become a bigger show. It's probably going to end up with a bigger budget over time. I know that there's kind of talks there's already a bigger budget thrown into the show anyway, but it's just going to be net positives for the show. More people interested in the show. It's going to make it even bigger than it was before. However, Doctor Who, for me, has always been a staple of British television. Always. And I completely disagree with the fact that they released it at midnight in the UK just so the American audiences could get it in prime time on streaming. And I know that we did get it on the BBC, like, in its normal schedule slot. But people had already seen the episode at that point. You could watch the episode at that point on BBC iPlayer. And I don't think that's right. That's putting streaming above kind of the original broadcast. And the original broadcast should always go to the BBC in Britain. You wouldn't expect, say, for example, like an episode of Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones to be aired, for British prime time for the first time, and the Americans get shafted because it gets released at an awkward schedule for them. with a show that, you know, probably bad example with Game of Thrones, but, you know, with Breaking Bad is an American production, is an American show set kind of in America. Doctor Who is and always has been British. And I think it's really, it annoys me that, you know, it was given a global release before the British general public could really get a good go at it.
Yeah, it's another one where I'm in two minds because, you know, as someone who does like tradition, and obviously throughout its entire history, it's been Saturday night tea time television. It has been for over 60 years. So, you know, from that perspective, I want that to remain. And I'm glad that despite what's happened, it still has that slot. And that's really important for that to have. However, I get from a business side why that decision's been made. I don't know what concessions needed to have been made for that to happen, but I guess it goes into kind of the business proposition that they need to tap into the larger audiences in order to make this collaboration between Disney and the BBC work.
Yeah.
That's kind of my take on it. Whether or not I agree, you know, like I said, I'm in two minds about it, but you know, I do think it's a shame that, you know, for a lot of us now here in the UK, we have to experience it. If we don't want to be spoiled, we've got to experience it either at midnight or first thing in the morning when we wake up. So, you know, rather than being able to wait to sit down, have food, whatever, and then watch as we, you know, usually would for all those years. So I do think it's a shame, and I feel like that's definitely something that helps strike a line between the past and the present. I think I'll see how it goes in terms of how I feel about it. Maybe I'll get used to it. Maybe I won't. You know, I know people have been saying, "Oh, the viewership's gone down." There is always going to be viewers in that slot for Doctor Who. You know, and you know some of the maybe the diehard fans who are not going to be watching it when it comes out will wait for that, and some people will just wait for that. They'll want to see it on kind of, I guess, normal television. But yeah, it definitely feels like something's been lost by not watching it for the first time on a Saturday evening.
Yeah, I just, for me, I don't understand why it couldn't have been released Saturday evening at 7 o'clock in the UK, which would be 2 o'clock America, right? And then they could, you know, wait for it to be available on streaming 5 hours later. I don't see the difference in that. I don't see why they've gone and given it almost a whole day's worth early for, you know, audiences online and streaming and everywhere else, for a show that, you know, is still a BBC production. I know that Disney have, you know, put some funding into it. I know that they've bought the rights to it for American broadcast and for worldwide broadcast and stuff like that. But, you know, it's for the UK, it's still, you know, here. So I don't understand where the deal comes in that they would get it early. But also, I guess, very interesting decision as well being made. I don't know whether BBC or whether Doctor Who made this decision to release the first 2 episodes together to really get people into the series, which I don't think has ever been done in Doctor Who, releasing 2 episodes at one time.
No, I think my only thoughts on that is perhaps I know there's a big summer with kind of, you know, football and the Olympics. And obviously Eurovision was on Saturday as well. I don't know if there was just kind of numerous factors going on, as well as the fact that maybe they thought Devil's Cord and Space Babies would, you know, be a bigger splash, you know, together rather than, you know, just Space Babies on its own.
Is it one of those someone would like one of the 2 episodes?
Perhaps. And I think it definitely works anyway in a lot of cases.
Yeah, because I'll be perfectly honest, I quite like the Devil's Cord. I think it's a fun adventure for the Doctor, and it was one which, I'll be perfectly honest, from hearing all of the behind the scenes stuff going into it, it's a musical episode. It's going to be set in the... There was some things going for it which I was like, I do not like that. And there was some things going for it which I was really intrigued about, because I don't watch Drag Race, I'm not a big fan, but I've heard very, very good things from my sister about Jinx Monsoon and how good of an actress she is. And this was her first TV actual role in a show or anything like that. She'd done stage production, she'd done obviously Drag Race, but this is her first time that she's actually played an actual role in something, which is interesting.
Yeah, Jinx has done, because I do watch Drag Race, and I've seen Jinx from their initial season up to they've won. Spoiler: they've won Race twice. They're the only
Wow.
drag queens to do that. They've done Broadway, they've done voice acting, so they've really kind of created not only their character but allowed themselves to break out of just the drag scene. And a lot of drag queens and drag artists from the show and just in general are kind of breaking out a little bit more, that you do see more drag out there, which is fantastic. And Jinx being on Doctor Who just seemed like the perfect fit. I think that they're getting a divorce now, but Jinx was married to someone who's from the UK, and so they've spent a lot of time here. I think they love British culture. The thing that I appreciate about Jinx as a drag queen is that they've kind of lent more towards what I would call British drag. There's more kind of vaudeville, kind of live performances, comedy, rather than kind of the lip syncing, dancing, very fashion centric, which is I would say is more of an American kind of stereotype of a drag queen. So I think Jinx fits nicely into kind of the mold of what a British drag artist could be, and also kind of what a villain can be. So for me, it was a perfect fit. And as soon as I saw that first promotional image of Jinx, as Maestro, I was like, this is going to be amazing. And I'm very happy that Russell did bring Jinx on board.
So am I. I'm really happy as well, because we were treated to, I'd say, one of the most memorable villains in quite a while. I know that we got to include the whole Chibnall era into that, because Chibnall did not have many memorable villains. I guess the only memorable villain at all would have been Sacha Dhawan's Master. That's kind of it. So to have kind of, Jinx come in and immediately make such a massive impact into the story, brilliant. And to kind of have that throwback and that callback to the Toy Maker and the Toy Makers Brigade, or what's it being called, the Pantheon?
Yeah.
Which is going to be very interesting, that we get to meet all of these different kind of gods from the outer universe coming in and causing trouble, and they're going to have various different kind of sci-fi mystic powers kind of thrown in and stuff like that, which is going to be very, very interesting. We haven't had that kind of villain before, a villain which is multiple villains, which of course we're going to get the one who waits at the very, very top, which a lot of speculation already going towards who's going to be the one who waits, whether there's going to be any more Time Lord kind of shenanigans thrown in there or anything like that. But I'm really looking forward to it. And this performance kind of in line with Neil Patrick Harris's performance as the Toy Maker kind of cements that kind of humor, cements that style. And it also cements the idea that we're going to see a few more actors coming into the roles and doing a similar kind of thing with different tweaks and twists. And the Doctor's going to have to deal with these kind of ravenous, kind of no control tricksters from across the universe, which I'm really, as far as a series concept is concerned, whether this is going to be just nailed to this series or whether it's going to be a larger scale one across the next few series, I'm really excited to see this element play out. Not knowing which episodes we're going to have one of these kind of godly creatures come in and cause havoc is very interesting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential in the idea of having villains on a similar level to Toy Maker. Again, I guess my fear is that let's try not to, use all of that in one series. Let's try and spread some of that out. Yeah. I think the interesting thing about the Toy Maker episode, the giggle, was that this was kind of, I'd say, a legacy villain, with a lot of power. And I guess I don't kind of want the Doctor to be going against someone like that every other week. I think there's definitely potential for that to kind of be more of a bigger story, whether that's kind of a mid-season or a finale. And so as much as I love this episode, I'm like, could it have been better if this was left a couple of episodes? So maybe this was episode 4 instead of episode 2, just so we got that break between a little bit.
Well, interestingly enough, a lot of people have been pointing this out and saying, huh, very interesting. Was this meant to be a later episode? And I think it was, because they mentioned this is set in June or July in this episode. And the
Yeah.
previous episode is set still at Christmas because it's literally just after Christmas Day. So I think it's very, very interesting that this is placed here, especially because at this point in the series, we're 2 episodes in. I guess you could say 3 episodes in, but 2 episodes that were chronologically one day after the other. We're now on the 3rd adventure with Ruby, and she already seems like she knows everything about the Doctor. You never run away from things, quotes like that, comments like that, kind of already aware of the universe, already aware of all these things. So I feel like we're missing a few adventures in there, which is really interesting. I do wonder. I was looking at the episode schedule, and we've got Moffat's episode next week, which I'm very excited about, just because he's a fantastic writer for Who. It looks like a bottle episode, kind of, set in literally one location, so it'll be fantastic. We've then got an episode called 73 Yards, which we don't know anything about. Dot and Bobble, which we don't know anything about. Rogue, which is the Bridgerton episode, and then the 2 finale episodes. So you've got 2 episodes there we don't really know too much about, 73 Yards and Dot and Bubble. Were either of those episodes meant to come before then? Because they wouldn't have wanted to go from kind of happy, light, comedic episode like Space Babies straight into something like Boom, which looks like a very dark, very kind of personal episode. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, no, it is. And, I hopefully we'll find out at some point. It's not the biggest kind of, thing, like put off thing. I guess it's just something that you notice. I try and think about, in, the Capaldi era where, he would just pick up Clara and they'd go off and then bring her back, and then it would be a bit of time in between. So that's what I'm thinking in my head, is maybe it's what's happened. But if not, perhaps there's just been a bunch of adventures that we've not seen, and maybe they'll be covered in other mediums like books and magazines, audio. So I'm not too kind of worried by it, but I'm just kind of thinking, why? Is that just purposeful, or was it just a case of, oh yeah, we just reshuffled the episodes?
I'll go into kind of things that I liked about the episode, and I'll go into a couple of things which are dividing people online at the moment, dividing fans at least. One of the things I absolutely loved about this episode was seeing the Doctor in a different costume.
Yes.
Seeing the Doctor in, and we're going to see this throughout the series, the Doctor dressing up a bit more. We've always seen it with previous kind of iterations of the Doctor. They will always wear their attire in different time periods, and there's the occasional one where they try and fit in when it's set in the past and stuff like that. But this is such a great look. I remember seeing the set photos when they first got released, and I was like, oh, this is great. I love the suit on Ncuti. It looks really, really good as well, like the dresses worn by Millie and everything like that. They got the vibe, they got the era absolutely right. They also introduced us to finally having the Beatles in Doctor Who, which I know has been a thing in the comics for a while. I haven't read any of them, but I know a lot of people were kind of talking about that in there. And we also get Cilla Black kind of, for one scene as well thrown in. So I know they weren't able to get the music for the episodes, but, having these kind of historical figures finally kind of show up in Who and, go into the 60s and everything like that, it's really interesting in that sense. And it's an era that has been explored in old Who, in kind of the original Who, but not really too much in new Who.
Yeah, I mean, I love any time where we go into the past and it's not Victorian times. I'm here for, basically, at this point. So to go to the 60s, and you are right, there were episodes in classic Who that did, obviously it was in the 60s, so there were some 60s episodes, but they're very few and far between, and it didn't really focus too much on the environment. There's a couple of there's a Cyberman episode in there that's in the I think there's a couple of them that are in that time period, and a couple of others, but there's not too much. So to be able to kind of really pin down that era, have that visual, I love the feeling of joy that I had when I think it was the Marlena Shaw song came on, when they run to the wardrobe and then they come out looking as they do. And I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want. So I really appreciate their joy. I think Millie and Ncuti, I think their relationship is so strong. And I think if there's anything about these 2 episodes, regardless of the stories, those 2 on screen are so magnetic, and I love seeing them together and their back and forths. I think one of my favorite elements of this episode was just their reactions when they were listening to the Beatles, and Scylla, she was saying, "Oh, Scylla will stick in my head for the rest of the week." I just think it was excellent, and again, to have kind of this era, specifically 1963, you know, the first Doctor and his granddaughter Susan are in London at that time. So there's always like, oh, they're out there. And, you know, the 7th Doctor also goes to 1963 in one of his episodes. And it's all very kind of like, oh, Doctor Who is happening. You know, those episodes that you might watch are happening at the same time as this and are around the same time. And that's very exciting to me. As much as the kind of reference to Susan, which makes me think there's been a lot of references, or there's a lot of things that are centering around.
There's always speculation around there is speculation around who Ruby Sunday actually is. That's one of the theories that's been thrown in. That it's Susan's daughter or Susan's granddaughter or something like that. I saw a really funny kind of proper crackpot theory today about Mrs. Flood, who's the mysterious character in the Christmas special, being Jackie Tyler, and that being the daughter between Rose and the Daughter. I was reading.
My goodness!
What am I reading?
There is a lot of things out there. I know one of the things is that there is a character, at least an actress, that has appeared in a few episodes, and the actress is called Susan Twist. Funnily enough.
Yes.
And she's in this episode as a cafeteria worker. She's in the Space Babies episode. She was in the Christmas. So, I mean, and I'm just like, who's she? So I'm like, alongside all the other things, there's also now this person who pops up similarly to like Clara when she was kind of Osgood, and then not Osgood as when she was Oswald and all of that stuff. And what's happening there? So as much, again, this is when it's like, as much as I love this story and kind of I'm enjoying the series so far, I'm just like, there's so many things being thrown in the air, and I'm like, what's going to happen and where's this going to take us?
Exactly. There's just so much mystery thrown into the show, and like you said, you don't always want everything to be a mystery box, and it seems like this series is going to be centered around who is Ruby. That is the mystery, and it's going to be figured out probably by the end of it, but we shall find out. This episode kind of ups the ante from the first episode. The first episode, we don't really have many action sequences. It's more of kind of horror running down corridors kind of sequences. There isn't really any big moments of action. This episode has, Maestro climbing out of pianos. It has the music battle. We've even got, at the very, very end, we have the musical number. And this is one that has divided fans. I'm also personally split on this because my sister was in that scene. She was filming and she was one of the dancers. And even today, Doctor Who put a post up on their social medias, and she is literally on the thing. So it's like I have a little bit of personal attachment to the scene, even if I wasn't the biggest of fans to see Doctor Who go fully musical. I understand the context of the scene. I think it's a very well shot scene, but I fall on the side of. I know we had the Goblin song, and that was fun at the time, and that kind of makes sense because it's within the Goblin lore. I know this is an episode about music, so it should have a musical scene, but I just wasn't a fan of the actual song itself, and I wasn't a fan of kind of, the context behind it and everything like that, with there's always a twist at the end.
For whatever reason, I really enjoyed it, and I don't really have any issues with it. I guess this is one of those times where I'm like, if it's just a rare occurrence, every so often a random things happens in Doctor Who, fine. I don't want to be a Scrooge and be like, oh, this is absolutely not. And it completely contradicts what I say about fantasy when something like this happens. But in my head, I'm like, okay, well, much like the Toymaker, Maestro's effect on the universe is kind of still there. This can just randomly happen. So, I mean, I just enjoyed it for what it was. I'm like, okay. And in my head, I can also kind of separate and go, well, maybe they just left. Maybe this is just for us as the audience that this happened. They're just utilizing,
possibly,
this cast Like, you know, I just try and do that, and I go, do you know what? If I ignore kind of logic and reason, fine.
A few people tried to put logic and reason behind it and said, look, the maestro kind of was, taking all the music. So now that music is back, it's kind of like a bit of residual power and kind of, it needs burning off kind of thing. Like the insane wackiness needs burning off with some more insane wackiness. But yeah, I will say, just a shout out, I'm super proud of my sister in that scene and everything like that. It's great to see her on screen. She's been in other things as well. But Doctor Who's been a show that I've grown up with, and everything like that. So seeing, family member on screen and everything like that, and seeing that entire dance sequence and everything like that, it was fun to watch. Whether I kind of agree with it or not, it was a well shot scene. It was a entertaining scene. And it'll probably go down in the Doctor Who kind of moments of, like, people will go back and say Doctor Who had a musical number kind of in it at one stage, So it's absolutely fascinating. Have you got anything else to say on anything in the episode? Do we want to talk about kind of Ncuti and Ruby's performances across the 2 episodes?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say final thing about Devil's Cord anyway. Just I like the story for what it was, and about stealing music and how that can affect. I literally, my Spotify end of the year thing is insane with the amount of minutes that I listen to. So the idea of not having any good music, I can understand how that would cause frustration and lead to kind of things like war and then the end of the world. Yes. I could totally get it. So I appreciated that, and kind of how the episode starts with, what is it? It's the kind of the tritone, and then kind of, it ending with Paul McCartney and John Lennon, fixing things. I think that's a nice kind of like wrap up to that. So yeah, enjoyed the episode for that anyway. But again, as I mentioned, Ncuti and Millie, I just think they are so good together. And Millie as being a northerner, I appreciate having a northern companion, having someone where I think a lot of times, especially kind of with Classic Who as well, and kind of when that was all going on, it felt very kind of, oh, it's proper British, despite where anyone's come from, it sounds like that. So it's, when Christopher Eccleston was the Doctor, it's like, oh yeah, someone who's from the north, and it's nice to have a bit of that in the show. So I appreciate.
We had Jodie Whittaker's Sheffieldness coming through as well.
Yeah. Although I did see a clip from, I think, the official Doctor Who podcast, where a guest on there said that maybe Ruby needed an interpreter because, like, for Yorkshire, and I was like, Manchester is not Yorkshire. What are you talking about? I was like, okay, whatever. But it is funny. It is funny that a certain accent or inflection can kind of throw some people off a little bit. But I think that's great, and I think, Ncuti and Millie together, I think they look great on screen and they sound great. They feel like a good Doctor and companion. And I'm really excited for this friendship, especially to kind of develop and see what happens. Especially when he's told her no about going to the very beginning of her life.
I agree with you completely, and I know you mentioned it earlier on in the review, but as a companion and Doctor duo, they have such good on-screen chemistry. Like, they have such good rapport with each other. Even after 2 episodes, you can tell that they are like best mates already, and they're just going on adventures and they're just having fun. And that is absolutely fascinating to see, immediately having that click, because we've seen it sometimes with companions. It's a bit of a rocky start. They're kind of not sure whether they want to go on the adventure or not, but this feels like the Doctor who has healed, which is the whole point of Ncuti's Doctor, a Doctor who's, had that time and is now completely kind of at ease with himself and the universe, just going on an adventure with someone who's very wide-eyed and wants to explore the world. It's a great combination, and I'm excited to see the 2 of them blossom with their kind of relationship and everything like that. I'm very excited to see what happens next week, where things get a little bit tense because of it. But between them, like we said previously, the mystery of Ruby Sunday, we will go back to that moment at some point this series. I'm guessing in the second to last episode we'll get kind of revealed of what it is, and then the repercussions will be the final episode. It'll be very, very interesting to see. I don't really want her to be kind of this star child, kind of savior of the universe or a god. I've seen one theory online, which I can actually get on board with, is that, she is one of the Pantheon. She just doesn't know it, which would be very interesting. I know that she's signed on for 2 series, hasn't she? And then she's
she's definitely filmed for the second series. So for me, I could, completely get if some things are carried over to there. And I think that's probably the good thing about perhaps having someone signed on for that amount of time. Okay, we can actually stretch this. I know it's less episodes than we're used to.
Yeah.
But, if that allows more time for things to develop, to have an actual plan and for your characters, I think is a really strong thing to have. I will say one thing that I am looking forward to is kind of because it seems like there'll be a second companion in that second series.
Yeah, there will.
And I can't remember the actress's name, but I know she's in Andor, which obviously is a great Star Wars series. So to see how this relationship will change when there's a second companion added, I'm really excited about that. I think we've not had enough kind of trio Doctor companion sets, especially when it's two female companions as well, and how that will work.
It seemed like with the last kind of, last roll of the dice, we had the fam, which then turned into kind of, John Bishop's character coming in, which I actually quite liked, John Bishop's character coming in. But I can never really get on with Yaz. So that's, it'll be very, very interesting to see kind of, as we're already kind of getting to know Ruby, how another person being thrown in would kind of help the dynamic and stuff like that. So moving on to what comes next, what is to come. We've already mentioned it a few times. We've got Moffat's episode happening next week. I'm really excited about that. Someone mentioned it to me the other day. We're already a quarter of the way through the series, which after 1 week being a quarter of the way through the series is absolutely not enough. I do wonder, because I don't think we're getting any old school monsters next week. I do wonder if we'll get any of the classic Doctor Who monsters coming into this series, whether they're going to leave it till next series and just take it as a clean slate. I have absolutely no idea what the answer to that question would be.
I don't either, and I've not seen anything that would suggest that there is yet. I personally would be fine with not. I think especially because there's so few episodes, I think it's fine to kind of let some of these, monsters or villains breathe. Especially, after the Toymaker was kind of at the end of last year. So I think, we've had at least a little bit of a taste of the previous villain coming back. And I think everyone would be happy if there was a break from the Daleks and the Cybermen for a little bit.
If there was any of them, I get the feeling it would be 73 yards, because that's set on Earth, that's set at Unit. And I don't know why, but I'm thinking that, Russell T, when he came back to Doctor Who, he came in with the Autons. We haven't had an Auton story since then. We've had Autons involved in episodes. We had, of course, Rory and that whole kind of thing. But apart from that, we haven't had a full Auton episode in a long time. I know he's a big fan of the character, so I was wondering, that's my theory at least, that we'll get one of those episodes thrown in there.
Well, I would think actually, because I know a lot of people have said that Ncuti is similar to John Pertwee in a way, in terms of kind of how he moves, how he looks. John Pertwee used to have like his different velvet jackets of different colors. He was kind of maybe the Doctor who changed the most, just because he would have those different jackets and cloaks that would go along with it. And his first story was an Auton story. For his first and second series, they were both Auton stories. So I feel like if there's any kind of Doctor to kind of throw the Autons in, it would be Ncuti, and I'd be really interested in kind of how that would work, especially in 2024. How does kind of this living plastic work now? And I think we can go beyond, the shop window dummies to other things. I think that's what they did with the second Auton story.
They could talk more about, the whole idea of deep fakes in modern society. They could talk about, all of the different things that have changed since then, with kind of even more use of plastic nowadays and everything like that. But also people being plastic conscious. It could be a very interesting storyline to kind of go into and everything like That's one of the villains, or at least one of the monsters that I'd like for them to bring back. Of course, I've got a Dalek in the corner sat on my fan that kind of rotates when it's spraying the room. So I'd love to see the Daleks back, but maybe not too soon. We've had a lot of Dalek storylines that have not quite landed in previous years. So it'd be nice to have maybe a 1 or 2 Daleks, not an entire army storyline thrown in, but possibly in Ncuti's second series, seeing as they are his greatest foe. It would be very interesting to see. I mean, we have, and we talked about this on our kind of legacy review of the new Who stuff. Every single Doctor's got a main villain. Who do you think Ncuti's main villain could be? Do you think it's going to be a new monster? Do you think it's going to be the Pantheon, I guess, and it's going to be kind of, all of these different monsters coming through over his entire run? Or do you think it's going to be something completely made up, something completely new?
I would probably lean more towards something completely new. I think with Disney as well, I think there's probably the opportunity, like money-wise, to create something that could be so memorable. I think, something like, I think the most modern kind of new Who kind of legacy monster, I'd say, would be the Weeping Angels, and they're for a lot
The
of people.
Silence?
Yep, potentially. I think maybe not as much as the Weeping Angels, but I think, say, when Doctor Who first came back in 2005, I think a lot of people would initially say, Daleks, Cybermen, Sontarans, maybe Zygons, the Ice Warriors. We have those level of villains. I think the Weeping Angels sits right along those, and potentially the Silence as well. And I kind of feel like this is the opportunity to create a new kind of legacy monster that hopefully can sit alongside those.
Absolutely. And I guess saying that, we've mentioned things from, Matt Smith's era, from David Tennant's first era. Haven't really mentioned anything from Capaldi's era. We haven't really mentioned anything from Jodie Whittaker's era that have had any form of longevity in that sense. It's just been the kind of past reuse of previous villains that have, in this form of, I guess, Missy and the Master, which is kind of reformations of those.
Bring Missy back. That's what I would say. Back. Just bring Michelle Gomez is welcome. And actually bring all the Masters, variants of the Masters back. I would love if one series you would just have, I met this Master and then another version of the Master.
I would love to have, and I know they've had this in the past with the various different audiobooks and with the various different comics. The Master has been known to take a companion himself and travel the universe. I would love to have a spin-off series with the Master and a companion, and just kind of less of adventures of going out and saving people and more of adventures of causing chaos and in some cases survival, just pure survival would be very fascinating, as like not quite like a Torchwood level of thing, but a darker version of Who for sure. And I know that someone, I can't remember who it was, I think it was one of the Doctor Who, one of the various different Doctor Who fan YouTube channels, pitched an idea of a series that followed, the Master and a companion and the Doctor and a companion, but you don't know which one's which. And you don't, as a new incarnation of the Doctor, you don't know which one's the Master and which one's the Doctor. And you're kind of following them both along. You have to figure it out yourself, which would be interesting to say the least. But I'm sure the Master will come back at some point. I mean, in whichever form the Master wants to show up with, whether they want to pay John Sims come back again, or whether they bring back Michelle Gomez, or I'll be honest, even Sacha Dhawan, I liked his Master performance, so it'd be very interesting to see any of those incarnations come back.
I mean, I'd be happy with any of them. I know they name dropped the Rani in Space Babies. I would be happy for a new version of the Rani. Maybe the Rani and the Master, they've worked together before. I would be fine for like, do you know what? More Time Lord survived. I'd be happy to fight. Okay, there's pockets out there. Gallifrey, as it was, is gone. If we have to put that to bed again, then let's just go for broke and say, right, okay, we're not the only one. I know he says he's the only one right now, but I think it's safe to presume that he's not the last Time Lord at this stage.
Oh, 100%. The fact that he keeps on mentioning, I'm the only one, it's so clearly setting up for him to not be the only one again. But anyway, maybe Ruby's a Time Lord. There you go.
Who knows? Who knows? Secretly.
Maybe she'll regenerate. That'll be the big twist.
I know she'll regenerate into Susan. It'll be a whole cycle.
Oh my lord!
Okay. I don't know.
Okay,
There's a lot of things.
Comment your thoughts below on Doctor Who for the first 2 episodes, what you're expecting from the series ahead. We've discussed it a little bit right now. We're going to be going, I'm not sure what day. I don't think there's a set day for it, but we're going to be going live on the channel here pretty much every single week, going through every episode and talking a little bit about it. We did 2 episodes today because they dropped 2 at the same time. So please go and give us your thoughts on those here. Follow us on all of our socials as well, where we'll probably tell you when it's going to be coming out and everything like that. We've got a few different reviews coming out soon-ish. I went to go see The Fall Guy today. I'm seeing Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes as well this week. I know George has already seen it, so you may see both of us on for a review for that. You may see one of or the 2 of us or anything like that. So please keep an eye on our socials. I'm just going to Linktree, link in the description, and you'll be able to keep up to date with what is coming out. I'm also going to put Sam's Twitter up on here. What's happening at the moment, Sam? What's happening?
I would say loads are happening, but not a lot is at the moment. But I guess, I've had a break from Cinema Savvy. I know that there is The Acolyte coming up, and I may be on for some of that. So I'll definitely be talking Star Wars on Twitter, X, whatever, when I am on there. But in general, Star Wars, James Bond, random geeky things is what I do there. I know I just passed 10,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, so that's linked on there as well. If anyone wants to take a look at any of the random things that I've created. Yeah. But yeah, most of the time if I'm doing something, it'll be with Cinema Savvy.
Brilliant. Excellent. Glad to have you on. And thank you everyone for watching, whether this is live or whether this is just a recording. And we will see you on the next video. Thank you.